What's up everybody, Brandon with GWRC. In this video I'm going to be going over installing the SCX24 Gladiator roof rack and awning. It's a fairly easy install, there's not a whole lot to it. This particular one I'm also going to be showing how I do the light. When you buy these from the store, they will not have this light included, they just have a blank light bar with no LEDs in it there. This particular one is one that I found on Amazon, but I do not know when they'll be more in stock there. Another place you can get these is Little Guy Racing Parts. They have those light bars as well, and it's a 61mm light bar. I think Little Guy's website shows it as a 60mm, but it's the same bar. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and get right into this install here. Easiest thing to do with doing this is actually to just remove the body from the truck. It's just 2 screws there, and the whole assembly comes off in one shot. So this is actually on a friend's truck. He already had a roof rack installed on here, but it was a steel roof rack and it was extremely heavy. This thing flipped constantly. So go ahead and, since we're putting this awning on, I'm also going to go ahead and remove the rack system on the back, because that has to come off in order to get the tent lifted off of here. So this one is just 4 screws on the bottom, and then it just comes right off of there. So on the bottom of here there's another 4 screws that you have to take off in order to get the tent off of the actual rack. Once all this is off, this is actually pretty flimsy, so just be careful. You don't want to break that. So this is the awning installation portion. It's pretty simple. If you look on here, it's probably going to be hard to pick it up on camera, but there are actually some slots that are on this. That is where the screws actually go in. If you weren't running this piece, this would actually kind of sink into those slots. So yeah, it's kind of lifted up there. That would actually drop into those slots to hold it in place a little bit. But with this, if you look, there is actually slots that are in here for the tent to fit into. So that's going to kind of lock the tent in place. So this flat part is what is actually going to go on the bottom here. And you can run this on either side. I personally like to run it on the right side of the vehicle, which is the passenger side. On a real one-to-one truck, that's how I would have it. I would have it come off the passenger side, not the driver's side. Forgot to mention at the beginning of this video, but all of these screws use a 1.3 hex, so you will need that in order to get all this installation done. It's basically just about every screw on the SCX24 is actually a 1.3 hex. And that's it. Now that's on there. Does add a little bit of extra weight. So anything you do up top with adding weight to the truck, you're going to want to actually kind of counteract that with weight down low. These trucks are kind of top heavy to begin with, specifically the Gladiator. So unfortunately that's going to be working against you a little bit. Actually, I'm going to leave this off for now since I'm doing this light bar install as well. And so we'll get into installing the roof rack on here. So when it comes to you, it's going to have all 3 of these screws and spacers that are over here that you can sort of see. All those are already going to be fit onto here. It just makes it easier for shipping to make sure stuff doesn't get lost and nothing gets forgotten, because unfortunately that can happen sometimes. All you have to do for install is remove these 2 screws, or the 4 screws here. Leave these middle ones installed, and you just have to turn these pieces to the side. So the way that this is going to actually clamp onto the roof is the screws are going to come through the body and screw into these racks right here, and then that's going to be the whole system held into place. The reason I do that is because it actually makes it easier for lining up where this goes on the truck itself, because if you notice, you can actually see the holes from the top. You may not be able to in the video, but you can actually see the holes here, and you can get a good idea of where you want this lined up on the truck body, so you can center it nice, or get it nice and centered and straight on there. And what I personally like to do is use a thumbtack, because these will fit right through this hole, and that makes the mark on the body. And actually most of the time it'll go right through the body as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this lined up. And the more time you spend on this, the cleaner it's going to look. So don't try and rush through it. Take your time. Make sure you get everything centered and straight. And then run the thumbtack through. Put a little pressure on the thumbtack. And it will leave a tiny mark on the body with where you need to drill a hole. I think this thumbtack, a little dull on the tip, so it's not actually going through the body, but now that you have that there, you can get a drill bit of some sort. You want to go pretty small because these screws are tiny. If you go too big, you run the risk of having the screw come through the screw head come through the body, and that's going to be too small of a hole for these screws to go through, but it's almost perfect for it. I'm actually going to go slightly larger on there. And there's our first hole. You're going to have to do that for all 4 of these holes, but once you get this first one kind of lined up in there, it actually makes it a whole lot easier to do the rest of them. If you look on here, it's kind of hard to see, but the front screws are actually going to be longer than the rear, because the front of the cab kind of dips down a little at the front. So I send 2 different size screws. Actually, it's 3 different size screws total for this set. The middle, but you don't have to worry about pulling these middle ones off, but these are very, very short screws to not poke through this. But the front ones are the longer ones, so just keep that in mind when you're doing this. And so you have your screw right there, and you have your 1mm spacer here. That just helps prevent the possibility of the screw head pulling through the body if you roll the truck over or kind of get into a nasty little crash or anything. And that's the first screw tightened down. Then you can just turn that rack over to the side, get everything straightened up again. So what I'm doing here is once I got that diagonal one in, I ran the screw through the top just to kind of hold it in place, so I was able to poke the hole through the front there, and now I got to do this back one. These racks here do have a little bit of flex to them, and it should give you just enough to be able to get a thumbtack or a drill bit or something down in there to make the mark on the body. And then you just have to pull these off, spin it out to the side so that you don't have to worry about undoing that first screw that you put in, because these things can be a little bit of a pain to get on here. And once those holes are drilled, you just get your rack line back up there, and you can start putting your screws in. Don't forget though that the short screws go to the back of it and the long screws are up front. So that's very important, otherwise you can actually poke holes in this. You don't want to go too tight with these screws because you can strip out this plastic. I mean, it's one of the downsides to these being plastic is they can strip. It's not super easy to do, but if you put too much behind it, you're going to strip the plastic out. Alright, there we go. We have the roof rack installed. Now for this light bar, I personally like to run them back down this way because it kind of hides it all. It tucks the wire behind all of your accessories that are on here. If you're not going to be running a back and you want to keep the bed open, you can drill a hole into the body here to do it. However, it's harder to run that wire around the interior if you're going to keep that in there. So I personally just like to run it back here and kind of keep it in the corner of this bed back here. And with this one, you do have to run a slightly larger hole than what you do for the screws, because this wire is a little bit thicker. Also, this kind of shielding that I put on this wire, that doesn't come on there. That's just something I like to do with my electronics, is I like to cover them all with this black shielding because it just makes everything look a little cleaner. So one thing you want to keep in mind when you're drilling into Lexan is you want to make sure, especially with these larger drill bits, that you are going really slow, because if you don't, it can split or crack the body piece there, and once it happens, there's really no fixing it other than just drilling it out larger to make sure that it doesn't continue cracking. So drill the small hole. Now obviously this piece here is not going to fit through that hole, but you can remove these very easily with a small flathead screwdriver. There are tools, specific tools for depinning these connectors, but flathead screwdriver works great. And you just bend these little tabs up right here. Once you do that, these slide right out, and then you can get these wires through the smaller hole. I still might have done it a little bit too small for this to get through, but we will see here in a second. Yep, still went a little bit too small. Just got to go one size up on this drill bit, and it just goes right through. So once that's in, you want to throw your pins back on here. Before you throw this connector back on, you got to make sure that you bend these little tabs back down so that they hook into the actual pins. And you'll hear them kind of snap into place. You probably didn't hear it with the microphone, but the microphone probably didn't pick that up, but you will hear them snap into place, and then you know that your stuff is installed there. And now we just have to get this roof rack back on, and that's it. Now you have roof rack and a little awning piece on the side there. The nice thing about this awning section is it actually acts as a riser for the tent here, which makes it level with the back of the roof rack. It's really the main reason I did this. You could technically run it without the actual awning and just have the mount underneath here. You can run it without any of it, and it just drops it slightly lower than the roof rack. So, but I think it puts it at a nice level. And then this is about the same height as these rails. So with that, the roof rack and awning installation are done. The only thing is, if you are running your light bar, you'll just have to route your wiring however you want to do it. That's going to be kind of up to you and what receiver you're using, or if you're using stock stuff. It just all kind of depends on how you're running everything. Just a reminder, this light bar does not come with this rack. There's a couple places you can find it. It's just a 60 or 61 millimeter LED light bar, and it'll come with just a blank piece there that looks kind of like a light bar. So if you don't want to run this, you don't have to. It'll have something that looks like a light bar there. It just won't have LEDs in it. But I want to thank you guys for watching. If you do have any questions, either leave a comment or message me on Instagram or on Etsy. I'll leave links to everything down in the description. But yeah, thanks for watching.